me something, Uncle Money?
Welcome to another episode of Practice Prosperity. We have a special guest, Dione Traci Duckett, founder of Duckett Law. We're going to touch on a lot of different things. One of the things is succession planning for business owners. We love to think about growing our business, things we could do in our business, but there is going to be a time that we won't be the primary operator of our business. So planning for that is going to be important. We're also going to touch on when we get older, thinking about how to structure ourselves so we could potentially benefit from Medicaid if we find ourselves in that situation. And last but not least, and I think it's really important, is special needs planning for those in our lives who are special needs. What are some of the things that we can do, structure, and put together? So I'm actually excited about this conversation, and we're going to touch on how Dione has actually grown her business. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Randall. I'm excited to be here. Always happy to talk with like-minded professionals.
Yes. So before we get into it, do you mind introducing yourself, your firm, and the type of clients that you serve?
All right. Well, I'm Dione Duckett. I am an estate planning and elder law attorney. And elder law, I think, is a misnomer because often people who have disabilities have a lot of the same issues that people who are aging have. And so I got into this practice area because my father had Alzheimer's, and I'm the oldest of 7 children. My youngest sister has Down syndrome. And so I was there when my dad did his planning. I had stepped out of law and I was in higher education at the time. But I serve people of all ages who have something that they want to protect and someone they love. People who don't care about anything don't really, I think that people who don't have something in particular that they care about, someone or something, whether it's a cause, family, or other things, don't necessarily feel the need to plan and protect themselves and others and their assets as much as people who do have someone or something that they care deeply about.
Yeah, I think that's important. Like finding your customer, people who not only want it but value it. I think that's definitely an important factor. A lot of folks who are listening to this are business owners. It's practice prosperity, how to actually grow a prosperous business. But people don't think about succession planning. So let's start off with definitions. What is a succession plan for a business from your perspective?
So I think of succession planning a lot the same way that I think of estate planning, because your business is part of your estate. Your estate is everything that you own. And when you are planning, when people think about estate planning, they think about what happens to my stuff when I die. But they don't think about what happens if you live. What if you become incapacitated? All right. And that gets skipped a lot. So it's the same thing for the business planning. What happens if there's a crisis? Is there a plan in place, or does, the business fall apart? Um, and it varies if you have partners or if you're a solo, or because what happens if you die? What happens if you become incapacitated? How are things going to move forward? Do you have employees? If something happens to the owner and the owner is the sole person who's making everything happen, things can fall apart quickly for a lot of people. So, so it's planning for protection of yourself and your business if crisis happens, if you become incapacitated or after you pass.
Let's make this conversation real. What are some things that happen to folks that cause them to become incapacity, are no longer able to operate their business? Like, what are some of those real risks that you've seen or have heard about business owners go through that I can't do my job anymore?
So there's personal things. Someone could get a divorce. They could have illness in the family, either themselves or parents. There's the aging. Um, you could develop dementia, Alzheimer's, develop um, um, a disabling condition or disease. You could be in a car accident. And that can happen to anyone at any age. So there's lots of different things, whether it's personal, illness, accidents, or dealing with family members who are, many of us are what we call in the sandwich generation. We've got parents who are aging, and then we're also raising children who are going to college. And so all of those different things can play into it that can impact your business.
So let's start off with succession planning 101. What are some key things you recommend the people you work with have in place? Like, what is, if you were to prioritize, of course, we all want to be perfect, but life is messy. But let's talk about the top 3 things a business owner should have in place to prepare for succession planning or potential incapacitation.
So they need, I think, if we think about top 3 things, they need to have a business structure. A lot of people are sole practitioners, um, you know, haven't thought about how they're structuring, but you need to have a structure in place, like a limited liability company that will protect your business assets from your personal liabilities and your personal assets from your business liabilities if you get sued in the business. And then you should plan with the end in mind. So what do you want it to look like when you pass? So that is the succession plan itself. Putting it, just like when you're doing estate planning, you are putting people in place or determining what's going to happen if you become incapacitated, and if you die. It's the same thing with the business. You have to work that out. And so operating agreements, your standard operating procedure, you need to have your corporate documents in place. So you need to have your structure, you need to have your corporate document plans, and then the succession plan itself. It can be incorporated into your operating agreement, or it can be a separate succession plan. And it also depends on how your business is structured, because if you have partners, you want the entity formation is important for protection of not only you, but you from your partner's liabilities. And the same thing with the operating agreements. What if someone wants to get out of the business? Those types of things. So having them planned out in advance and getting them in, and it's a process. You can't just wake up one day and put together an operating agreement. So
When we talk about communication, I think communication, and you know this with the estate planning, gets a lot of people in trouble. Who should I be communicating my succession plan if I'm a business owner with? Should it be my spouse? Definitely, I hope my attorney. Like, who are the key people in your life you need to say, this is my hopes and desires if I'm unable to work this company anymore?
So I think the key people, definitely, you have to have your team or your board who helps you put together the plan. So that could include your financial advisor, your attorney, and you may have several different types of attorneys: an estate planning attorney, a business attorney. Sometimes estate planning and business attorneys do both. Um, um, your You may have insurance agents, and your CPA. And then your family, a lot of times people are private and they don't know, they don't let family members and others know what's going on, but someone needs to know. So your professional team needs to know. And it's good to have a collaborative team so that one hand knows what the other hand is doing and you have a good cohesive plan. But then whatever key family members there are, if something happens to you, the business could go bankrupt in 30 days. And so, or not go bankrupt, but, take a serious loss. Things fall apart unless your family members are in your business. And if you have partners, of course, the succession plan is done together as partners.
Yeah, somebody told me.
Your question.
Somebody told me if something were to happen to the business owners, because we're so set up for automatic payments and withdrawals, those aren't going to stop just because somebody passes. They have to have actions taken in place, and it's more complicated than just showing you your beneficiary in a personal checking account to stop different things. I think that's really important. Now, you talked about family.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I come from a large family, so we think about these things. It's planning for our family members as they age, especially if they don't have means. My goal as a financial planner, those that I work with have the means to not worry about certain things. But in actuality, managing your finances for the potential benefit of Medicaid is a reality a lot of people face. Talk about, let's say in general, the benefits of Medicaid and why would somebody even consider planning for it?
Okay. So Medicaid is a government benefit program and it's based on means. So people get Medicare and Medicaid confused. And I think one way to remember is Medicaid ends in aid, and so think of it in terms of government aid. A lot of people don't want government aid, but we have paid for it through our taxes, our FICA, and that's another thing to think about. So when you work for a company and you have you're paid on the payroll, you're a W-2 employee, FICA comes out. And so FICA covers Social Security and Medicare, all right, which is what you get when you retire. Medicaid, on the other hand, is based on having low assets and low income. And there's lots of different Medicaid programs, but when we're talking about long-term care, we're talking about aging, blind, and disabled. And so if we talk in terms of Medicaid to plan for long-term care, generally we're talking about nursing home Medicaid. And there are some programs that will waive the requirement of being in a nursing home, but generally we're talking about nursing home Medicaid. And so on average in Georgia right now, nursing home costs $10,000 a month. And a lot of people don't know that. And so, and the guidelines that we talk about for Medicaid is that you can't have more than $2,000 a month in income. Right now it's closer to three because it does get adjusted for inflation, but we've always said $2,000 a month. And I'm talking about an unmarried individual. And then you can't have more than $2,000 worth of assets. The house that you live in is exempt from being counted, and one vehicle is exempt from being counted. For married couples, the guidelines are the same for the person who is disabled, but there are more exceptions or provisions for married couples because they don't want to impoverish the well spouse. And so a lot of people think that they can just give things away so that they can qualify for Medicaid. But if something happens, and in order to qualify for Medicaid or nursing home level care, you need assistance with two or more activities of daily living. And I don't know how far you want me to go down this rabbit hole. So, but that's eating, bathing, transferring from sitting to standing, toileting, dressing, and I can't think of the sixth one. So, but two or more, you need assistance with that. And so if you don't, you have to qualify physically and you have to qualify financially. And so, but now that we've said that, people always say, well, I won't be able to qualify, but there is planning that can be done. And so, and you asked the question about why would you want to do that? $10,000 a month can go through your assets really quickly. All right. And in-home care, everybody says I'm not going to the nursing home, but statistically 50% or more of us are going to need some level of care as we age. And so they may not need full nursing home level care, but 50% of us need some level of care as we get older, and people are living longer. So, And if someone needs 24-hour in-home care, that usually costs more than nursing home care. All right. And so some of the things to consider when planning is that what does it mean for your family members if you become incapacitated? Because sometimes caregivers even pass before the people that they're caring for. So caregivers often have to spend less time at work, take lesser jobs. There's lots of things that happen to impact the caregiver. If you're talking about someone who's in the sandwich generation, they've got kids they're taking care for, and now they've got an aging parent who also needs assistance. And we're all going to get there. So it's nothing to be ashamed of. And so, but you have to think about not only how it's going to impact you, but how it's going to impact the people that you care for and the other people who are going to be responsible for helping you. Where else would you like me to go on that?
So basically what you're describing, this is going to affect multiple generations, these type of decisions. Mm-hmm. Let's make the number a little bit real, because I think I'm biased, but I think the folks that are listening to this call hopefully will never have to participate in a Medicaid program, but it could touch your family members. Your best estimate, what percentage of our senior citizens are on Medicaid? What would be your guess?
Now, I don't know the answer to that question. Okay. A lot of people who are in nursing homes are. I don't know how many people are actually on Medicaid. But a lot of people can qualify. And one of the things when I was talking about assets, as we get older, and we don't need as much, and we are thinking about where we want things to go when we pass, or many of us are. And so there's 3 ways to pay for long-term care. And people need to understand that Medicaid, and it depends from state to state, does not pay for assisted living in Georgia. All right. It will pay for nursing home care, but not assisted living. And so, there's basically 3 ways to pay for long-term care, with your savings or private pay. So that could be your savings, that could be what you earn monthly, whether it's your retirement and other family members assisting you, or long-term care insurance. But and you would know better than I do, but my understanding is the sweet spot is between the ages of 50 and 65. And after 65, to obtain long-term care insurance, and after 65, it becomes much more difficult to get and much more expensive. And I've had clients who have it and then decide, oh, it costs more and more, then they cancel it. And then they get a diagnosis, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. And so now, how are they going to pay for the care that they need down the road? So I think I kind of gotten in a rabbit hole here. And so, because I get deep in the details, but when we're talking about the planning and we're talking about what we're who we're protecting. I was talking about the 3 different ways. So it's private pay, long-term care insurance, or apply for Medicaid. And so Medicaid, we said, has the financial piece, as far as resources, the amount of resources you can have, the amount of income you can have monthly, and then the actual qualifying medically or physically. And so you have to have all 3 in place. Now, when it comes to the financial piece, if you have more than $2,000 or $3,000 a month in income, you can still qualify for Medicaid, as long as your income does not exceed the cost of the nursing home. If it exceeds the cost of the nursing home, then they're going to say you don't need it. It can exceed by $1. But if it's less than by $1, then you can still possibly qualify for Medicaid. Then with the assets, you don't just start giving things away and put your children's names on things so that you can qualify, because Medicaid has a 5-year look back period, and they're looking to see if you made gifts and transfers for less than fair market value. And if you did, the presumption is that they were made in order to qualify for Medicaid. And so they can get 5 years worth of bank accounts statements, whether the statements are closed or open, the accounts are closed or open. They're already tied into the IRS. So they can ask you for everything for the last 5 years, and they add it up and determine a penalty period for how long it would be before you could possibly qualify for Medicaid. So you don't qualify, you don't apply just to see if you can, get in there, because that's gonna get the to see if you can qualify, because that's going to trigger the penalty period. So what we do is you get to where you are what we call otherwise qualified. You've already got your assets where you need to be. You've already you've got a plan in place to deal with the extra income, and then you can qualify when you apply. So does that make sense?
What if there's somebody who is, let's say, they have some means, but they do realize trajectory wise, I probably will need some Medicaid help.
Okay.
Maybe 10 years down the line, maybe 15 years down the line. What do you advise family members to do to make sure that she is a qualified candidate, and be strategic and fair and all those other things?
Okay. So are you talking about the planning in general?
That's correct. What would you tell that family if they came to you and said, "Hey, we'll probably be on Medicaid in 15 years. We don't qualify today. What should we do to put ourselves, the family, protecting their assets and their discretion? Like, what should they be doing?"
So it depends on their asset mix from an estate planning standpoint. If you, for instance, if you've gotten a diagnosis of Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, and you think you might need Medicaid later to pay for long-term care, then we have what you call proactive planning, and that usually involves planning with an irrevocable trust. But that is going to depend on your asset mix, okay? Because once you put property into an irrevocable trust, you can't take it back out. So you put the assets that you want to protect in there, and they have to be there for 5 years and a day, because that transfer to the trust is a gift, or a transfer for less than fair market value. And but when doing that, and that's why you have to be strategic, we look at your entire asset mix, because you put the property into the trust, it's got to be there for 5 years. What happens if you're in an accident or something happens in year 3 or year 2? Then we have to look at what you have as far as assets, or income, other assets, other sources of income. Do you have enough that would cover if something happens? What is the backup plan? And so we don't just throw everything into an irrevocable trust and say, okay, that'll take care of it. So you need to talk to a professional and make sure you're strategic. If for some reason, so proactive planning is when you plan when you don't think you'll need nursing home care for at least 5 years. All right. And then we look at everything, and and some people can transfer most or all of their assets into a trust and live off their income. Some people may want to have, two different, some people may want to keep some assets outside of the trust and have them just for themselves. And then you may have to spend those down if you're in a crisis period. So we got proactive planning and we've got crisis planning. Crisis planning is when you don't have 5 years. That's, people, you haven't put a plan in place. A lot of times people get older, fall and break their hip. When you're older, a lot of times that is the beginning of the permanent stay in the nursing home. People go into rehab and they're planning to come out, but a lot of times they end up staying. And so now Medicare, which was just paid for based on your paying into FICA throughout the years, Medicare only pays for rehab, and only pays for rehab up to 100 days. All right. And that's up to, not 100 days, up to. If they think it's not working, they're going to cut you off. And so then people are scrambling. All right. But there's still something that can be done. Now you're in a crisis mode and you can spend down, but you have to spend down strategically. All right. And so because the purpose of the spending down is to minimize it, because you probably will give some things away. So you want to minimize any penalty period, and you want to create a stream of income that will cover the penalty period. And there are certain things that you can make transfers for, or purchase, or spend on without incurring a penalty. One of the things that you can do is buy funeral plans for your family members. So I've heard one attorney say, you get a funeral plot, but there's different things that can be done. And I want to, we didn't say at the beginning of the program, nothing that I'm saying should be construed as legal advice. It's all general educational information. But there are things that can be done strategically in case there is a crisis, or if there is a crisis, there's strategic planning that you can do to get yourself qualified more quickly and maximize the amount of assets that you're protecting.
We know anything can happen at any time, but from a practical standpoint, if this family, as you said, kind of feel like Medicaid is going to come down the pipe, what age should they be beginning planning? Is this like, okay, if you make it to age 70, let's start doing some things. If you make it to age 85, let's start doing some things. Like what age do you feel like practically makes sense?
I think people definitely should start looking at it 50 and up. 50s, 55. You look at the longevity in your family. People don't even do their regular estate planning. So we know at least 50% of Americans don't have an estate plan. And so people often wait until it's too late. And so it's not necessarily a particular age, but generally, I think in the elder law community, we're talking about 50, 55 and up. But the key is, like, if you're planning with an irrevocable trust, if you put your house in that trust, you're not the beneficiary of that trust. Okay. You can still stay in the house. But the property that you put into the irrevocable, or let's call it the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, the property that you put in there, you can't take out for yourself. You can indirectly benefit from the property if it's done right and the right trustees are in place. But you are not the beneficiary of the trust that you create for Medicaid planning. And so distributions cannot be made to you, and not while you're alive, and not after you pass. Well, of course, after you pass, they're not going to be made to you. So you have to think about where you are in your life, what assets you want to protect for future generations or something like that. And then, so there's not necessarily a particular age, but I would say 50, 55 and up, you should at least be considering it. And then you consider your health. And then if you get a diagnosis of something like dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, because I think the average stay in a nursing home is 2 to 3 years. But if you get something like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, you can live a very long time. And that's where the concern comes into play. And so that long-term care insurance, and I don't know if you deal with that, but that's probably one of the best ways to plan. But those usually, some really good policies may have unlimited coverage. And so, but if you have 5 years worth of long-term care insurance, that will allow you to back up and plan. And you have to look at the amount of coverage that you have and the different types of products. I'll let you talk about that kind of stuff, because now I hear that, instead of the standalone long-term care insurance where if you don't use it, you've just spent all that money. It can be converted to life insurance. So there's lots of different things that you talk to your financial advisor about.
So, I live in the real world, and I hope people work with me and work with you will do the necessary steps. But the average person is not going to set up a trust. The average person is not going to pay the premiums of a long-term care policy. So if those two options they're not off the table, but they're just not going to act on it. So they might as well be off the table. What are some things you advise people to do, like either giving to family members? Like, what strategies have you seen work when, let's be practical, they're usually not going to execute on those items that you described?
Well, if they're not prepared, then they're relying on family members and themselves, and it totally depends. You may have someone who has lots of assets, and it's a personal choice. If you have lots of assets and you have the money, some people feel like, I worked, I earned this money, and that's what it's for, to take care of me. All right. Others have to use their village. All right. And when you use your village or whatever resources you have, once those resources are gone, you'll qualify for Medicaid. So as long as you weren't giving them away. So if you've used them on yourself and you run out, then you've gotten to the point where, what's your other option? If you have family members who will take care of you, then the other side of it goes into social work, which, there are some elder law firms that have social workers on site. But that type of planning, I do the planning for getting your assets in place and protecting them. But other things are just using your village.
Now, one topic that I'm really curious about is special needs planning, which have some similarities as you mentioned before. Let's first define what is special needs planning, and then we'll go into deeper questions that I have.
Okay, so when we talk about special needs planning, we're talking about, again, protecting assets. And we're protecting, for the most part, we're usually talking from the legal standpoint and the estate planning standpoint. We're talking about protecting assets for a loved one so that they can receive or benefit from assets without it impacting their ability to qualify for government benefits like Medicaid. And so when you do that, that's the definition. Planning for the protection of assets for a loved one who has a disability, so that it doesn't impact their ability to qualify for for government benefits.
And what have you seen? Like, why would a parent do the work and the planning to make this happen? Like, what is at stake for this specialty area to even exist?
So what's at stake when we talk about financially is that, again, for the government benefits, you generally have to have low assets and low income. And so if a parent passes and a disabled child inherits a substantial amount of money, if that person is already on government benefits that are means tested, meaning you have to have low assets or low income now, and usually it's used like we talked about for the Medicaid and generally that's what we're talking about, but Medicaid for nursing home, the threshold is $2,000 or maybe $3,000. When we're talking about assets, we're talking about $2,000. So if somebody inherits $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, that can bump them off of their assets. And so you can plan for them. One of the tools we use is a special needs trust. And when we're talking about estate planning, for when you die, we talk in terms of a supplemental needs trust, but they're pretty much the same, and they varies what they call them from state to state. But a special needs trust, basically benefits can be put into the trust for the beneficiary, who is a person who is disabled. And because the trust is a separate entity, they are not counted towards, as long as the trust meets the requirements, they're not counted towards that person's assets or resources when it comes to qualifying for those government benefits. They're not allowed to be their own trustee. They can't, if they have power and authority over the assets, then they will be counted. So you're putting it in a trust and putting someone else over to manage it. There's two different kinds of special needs trust. I was talking about the supplemental needs trust. So a special needs trust is one where I create a trust and I take my own property and put into it. An example of where that might come into play is if I'm in an accident with a big truck and they're at fault and I get a settlement from a lawsuit, okay? Big settlements usually mean there's going to be big medical bills. All right. And so if you want to protect those, you can create a special needs trust and put the property into it. And then it won't be counted, when it comes to trying to qualify for the Medicaid to pay for those benefits. And so that's the first part where you put your own assets into the special needs trust. Okay. But the thing about that is when you die, the government wants to be paid back. You can't just take your own property and say, I'm going to put it over in this trust so I can get these government benefits. All right. So the third party is when someone else, like a parent, creates a trust for a disabled child. And so the parent is creating the trust. The parent is putting their own property into the trust for the child. And so that's a third party trust. That one doesn't have a payback provision because it's not the disabled child taking their own property and putting it into the trust. So it's like the government's like, you can't have it both ways. And so that's the third party, and that's often referred to as the supplemental needs trust. So so the third level we want to talk about is when you're doing your estate planning. Maybe all of your beneficiaries are alive and well. Okay. So, but what if someone's in that accident with the big truck? What if somebody develops a disabling condition, a multiple sclerosis or something that they're not able to work? All right. So you can put in your planning what we call the contingent special needs or supplemental needs trust. And that says that if at the time of my death, one of my beneficiaries or any of my beneficiaries is disabled and needs to qualify for government benefits, then don't give it to them outright or in a regular trust. Put it in the special needs trust. And that way it's a third party with no payback provisions. If instead it's going outright to the person and now they're disabled, then it's theirs. And if they create a trust, now they're creating a first party trust with payback provisions. And there's lots of other rules that I'm not going to get into, but there's different types. And then if there's not that many assets, there's pooled trusts, pooled special needs trusts that are run by community organizations. So there's many options out there.
What is the difference between a special needs trust and what I hear out there called an ABLE account? Are they the same thing? Are they different? When do you use one versus the other?
An ABLE account they're not the same thing. An ABLE account is an account that can be used, I think is developed primarily to give a person who's disabled a level of independence. For instance, my sister who has Down syndrome. An ABLE account, you can contribute money to the account annually up to the amount of this gift tax exemption, which is right now $19,000 a year. But you can contribute money to that, and that money will not be counted against the person, and it can be used for them to pay expenses. They can have a debit card. So my sister could have her own debit card and go shopping. It can be used. It won't be the money that's in there won't be counted against them. And it's a type of 529 account, like the college education fund accounts. And so it's it's another way to provide the funds without causing a penalty. Typically, the money cannot be used for things that are covered by the government benefits, but they've relaxed some of those rules as well. As far as paying for housing, because usually the government benefits pay for those things. And so there's no penalty for having those funds. So a lot of times a plan is going to include a special needs trust and an able account.
Fascinating. Okay, so let me see if I understand. The able account is for, short-term payments of things that the person needs, while the long-term, the special needs trust is more for a life event happens to either the person who is disabled or the parent, and there's some strategy involved in that. Is that kind of the difference?
But it's not really long-term. I mean, a special needs account special needs trust can, you can also have, so a person can have a special needs trust while they're alive, and that's to provide benefits for them, but allow them to still qualify for the government benefits. All right, and so that's managed, and the able account is more for providing lifestyle funds for, and the funds aren't used. The funds in the able account can pay for some things that government benefits might pay for without there being a penalty. The funds in a special needs or supplemental needs trust are not to be used for paying for the things that the government benefits pay for. So, and that's usually things like the housing, food, living arrangements, that type of thing. So that's why when we're talking about the third party, it's called a supplemental. So it's a supplement to to what's provided through the government. The able account is for more everyday expenses, but the funds in the special needs account can also be used for everyday expenses. So that's why I'm saying there's not a difference there. But I really don't know how else to state that. Did it make sense?
Yeah. So a lot of parents can be kind of eerie about this. This is a new space, estate planning. Somebody who's gonna, see everything I have, and I have to have tough conversations about what could happen. So if help somebody explain the process. If I have a special needs child, I know I need to do this planning for them. My heart yearns for that. What is the step-by-step process that your firm guides them through to allow them to have that plan, that peace of mind?
And so we always start with the consultation, and we find out what the goals, objectives, fears, and concerns are. We find out what wants to be set aside, what the parent wants to set aside for the child or person who has special needs. A lot of times they're more concerned about what happens if something happens to me and I've been taking care of this person. Example, my sister is going to be 40 years old. My mother's going to be 84. They've been joined by the hip for 40 years. And so the asset protection piece is developing the trust and things like that. But there's also planning that needs to be done. What about the care? What about, if you're talking about somebody who's born with a disability and has cognitive disabilities, then when they turn 18, they're an adult. So then there's guardianship and conservatorship that you may need to have to put into place, because once they're an adult, they have their own rights. The court doesn't know, and the parent no longer has the authority to make those decisions. And so that's where you have to go. If it's that level of disability, you have to go and have guardianship and conservatorship put in place so the parent can continue to manage and make decisions on behalf. So we look at the whole spectrum. And so, and the age and where the child is. And so there's the planning for the financial, and there's the planning for the care. We help clients think through, if something happens to you, who do you want to care for this person? Who is the best person? Because you're trying to avoid having a guardianship conservatorship proceeding where possibly a complete stranger could be put into place, or somebody you wouldn't want to take care of that person could come into place. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that planning. So there's planning for their care, planning for their finances. Same thing while they're alive. A lot of times there are other people, grandparents, friends, who want to give gifts to the loved one. All right. So that's why you might have a special needs trust while they're alive, so that they can give the gifts to the trust. If they're already on government benefits, you don't want to disqualify them for that. All right. And so we look at the whole situation, and then we help the client or parent or whoever the family member is work through what are the things that you do for this child. What are the things that you want people to know as far as the care? A lot of times, special needs children may have tactile issues where certain fabrics bother them, or they like certain things, or certain foods they don't like. Their routine, when they lose a parent, all of a sudden that's disrupted. My sister is also a type 1 diabetic, so if there's an emergency one day, okay, who's going to handle her insulin? How much does she get? How much can she eat? What is she supposed to eat? The parent knows all of that, or the caregiver knows all of that. Those things should be documented. So we help the clients think through all of those things, put them in place. Do we want to give my sister is the youngest of 7, and she's high functioning. She understands a lot. And so people go shopping and they have their credit cards. You have that able account. She can have a debit card. She can pay for her own movie. Those it gives her a level of independence. She can't manage the trust, but with the able account, you can have a debit card, and the caregiver can put controls on it. What it can be spent on, limits on it, that type of thing. And so there's a lot of different things that go into it. And then just an awareness of the planning, the financial piece, because a lot of times parents are just paying for things. But they haven't thought about when something happens to them, how is this going to be handled? Who's the best person to manage the finances? Who's the best person to manage the care? So we walk them through that and then determine the tools that would be appropriate for the particular circumstance.
Like it. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing those things. I know it's detailed, but that word needs to get out there because we are having a demographic shift where this is more going to happen, or more planning needs to happen around this relative to the general population. Before we get into the business side of our interview, as business owners, I know you're anxious about whether you're doing the best thing with your money. You're not alone. I'm Randall Avery, owner of Diesel Wealth Management, and I specialize in simplifying wealth for those near retirement and business owners. Allow me and my firm to create a plan that fits your unique needs so you can actually enjoy the wealth that you've built. Don't wait. Click the request in the discovery call in the description below. Then you can enjoy the rest of this insightful interview. Now let's switch over to your business.
Okay.
Why did you go into business? You could have decided to join an already elder care law firm, a law firm that does special needs for planning for kids, but you decided to go out on your own. What made you take such a risk?
The funny thing is, I never really wanted to be in business for myself. My father and mother were both entrepreneurs and always encouraging that. And I was not interested in wearing all the hats. I wanted a salary and benefits and all of that. But what I found is throughout my career and my various careers that autonomy is very important to me. And so, a lot of times there's politics, there's, working for people who you don't agree with, you And when you work for someone else, it's their rules. so what for me was a very big issue is autonomy. When I went to law school, I just got a law degree for options. It was never really a goal of mine to be a lawyer. But law, like an MBA, applies to everything. Business applies to most things, law applies to most things. And so I got to law school and I absolutely loved it. And I came out, I was a corporate associate, and I did not like that. I liked the law. I did not like working. I was at a relatively large firm in Baltimore, Maryland. They were also having their own issues, so that probably tainted my experience a little bit. So I ended up leaving that practice. And parents said, don't quit, take a leave of absence. You might want your job. So I did that, but I left in a U-Haul. And so I worked. My mom had an apartment complex and I managed that for her for 3 years. But I got to do a lot of volunteering. I got very involved in my church, alumni associations, all that kind of stuff, sorority. And I started to see if I could get paid the things that I volunteer to do, then, that would be great. And so before, I was pretty shy. And so my degrees were in computer science, accounting, and law. Those were things, and transactional law, things where I could find out what needed to be done and go to my corner and do it. But I found out I needed more interaction with people. I'm from the oldest of seven, so being shy doesn't mean I don't like people. And so it was a long career getting back to the law. And what got me there, I was in higher education for a very long time and planning to stay there. And and there were a couple of times that I had entertained the idea of an estate planning and elder law firm. But I left my job. I was dean of students at Howard Law School, and I left to come to Georgia and get a PhD because I wanted to get to the faculty side. But I didn't want to do it in law. I wanted to do it in business. I have a lot of business and administrative experience. But I was close to 50, or I was 50, and I decided, okay, I've had enough school. So I stopped at the master's, and I had a law degree, and I had always thought about this elder law and estate planning. And I will say what led to that were the issues with my family. I was one of the caregivers for my dad. When the planning was done, we had a great attorney who did his planning, but they didn't do much counseling. And even though I'm an attorney, I wasn't practicing law, and I certainly didn't know anything about estate planning, elder law, or any of that. And I made my share of mistakes. Fortunately, they weren't detrimental mistakes. And what you don't know, you don't know. So you need guidance. And so I started my law firm. and this is year 10 for me. And it has been a great thing. What I didn't like about the law was it was very adversarial, whether it's criminal law. Well, I was corporate, but even that, you're always fighting or gearing up for a fight. And it's hard to turn that off when you go home. And so I think I am doing good. I'm helping people. I think I'm filling a need, especially in our community. When I talk about the Black community, I live in the Black community. Atlanta is still very segregated. So I think I'm filling a need. I get hugs from my clients. And I take an educational perspective because I felt that's what I needed, when I was working with my father. And we've got the same thing. I mentioned the issues with my sister. So family was definitely what motivated me to get into this practice area.
That makes sense. So you talked about the community. And the way we were initially connected was I actually attended one of your lectures on estate planning.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Wow, it's a long time ago. It was probably like 10 years ago. So you've been at it,
when I was
for a
just
while.
getting started.
And one thing about Practice Prosperity, we love to give business owners tips and tricks and all those things. How have you used educating your community to grow your firm and get the name and the word out there of your business?
So I like you mentioned, going to a seminar. That is mostly how I did it. I was doing seminars at churches, seminars at community centers. I had my tables at community fairs and things like that. And then I also did the networking with allied professionals such as yourself. That first year that I started, I think I spent $50,000 and brought in 14. And so I was living with mom. And so, because I had quit my other job to become a broke student, so I was living with mom then. And then I also did get a second job working at Atlanta's John Marshall Law School. And that was very helpful. And because the dean I told him my priority is my law firm, and he was flexible. And so that first year I had two jobs, but I started networking. I went through, and I serve everybody. I don't serve just the Black community, but I will say my clientele, probably due to location, and there's not a shortage of attorneys, and people often like to work with people who look like them. So and so I, one day during that first year when I didn't have many clients, I got all my I had folders that I used to pass out at the seminars. And I got in my car and I went door to door to churches and said, I do free seminars, right? And then I got online and I Googled financial advisors. And I found, I went to, Edward Jones, Merrill Lynch, independent people. And I called and I said, I'd like to meet. And, I told them who I was and would like to meet. And, that we probably have common clients not common between us, but who need each other's services. And so a lot of times they would be like, how did you find me? And so I would say, well, a lot of times my clients want to work with people who look like them. So I gave you a call. And then they would say, bet, I've been looking for you, because there's not a lot of Black estate planning attorneys. They're growing. We're definitely growing a lot. And so then a lot of financial advisors were out there, but when I was starting, they're saying, yeah, my clients want a Black estate planning attorney, but there's nobody out there who really does that. And I think it's because it is a hard practice to build. When it comes to criminal law, family law, personal injury, those people need an attorney now. Estate planning, people think we've got forever to plan. A lot of people know we need to do it, but we know 50% of Americans don't have plans, and 70% of Black Americans don't have plans.
So who informed you that that was a good strategy to knock on doors at churches, to reach out to financial planners and other centers of influence? Like, how did that idea come to you? Is it intuitive? Was it ingrained in you because your family members were business owners? Like, that is not natural. Where did that come from?
Well, I think estate planning organizations, because there's two primary. So I was educating myself constantly, and I had years prior, because I've been doing estate planning on the side. I had years prior quit a job and started Duckett Law. I was working for Howard then, and I quit and I started that. So I had gotten into it a little bit, but then the dean called me back. All right. And I knew that if I ever went back, how I'd do it differently. And so I stayed involved in the bar associations and that type. So the educating, the primary ways that estate planning attorneys build their practices is seminars and network referrals. And so even, there's books written on it and all that kind of stuff. So, and so I think that's how I knew. And that's the other thing is over the years, because even when I quit the law firm the first time, I got a business card that said I don't know why then I thought about elder law and estate planning, because I did not know what elder law was. But I think it's because my parents worked and took care of the older people in the family. And so, but I didn't know that you can't just get a business card and they will come. Okay. And then I was shy. So the things that I've done over the years, I was director of development and alumni relations. That forced me to get out of myself and work the room. And so, and then that on top of knowing that estate planning attorneys build their practices through seminar marketing, and so you have to educate yourself about the business side in addition to what you actually do. And so that's how I knew I needed to do seminar, because I did not know that when I first got that business card. So yeah, so I would say it was from continuing education in the area of estate planning. That's how I learned that.
How nice would it be to print a business card, put out a website, send out one email, and business come? That'd be a beautiful thing. Now, out of all those community engagements, which ones worked the best for you? Like, which ones brought in the most clients, the most revenue for you? Like, what activity is like for me and for the way I operate and who I am, this works?
Okay. What do you mean? Oh, for me. So estate planning, again, it's a long game. And so, because I find that when I do the seminars, whether I'm in front of 2 people or 40 people, I usually got 2 clients. But I've had people who hire me 7 years later.
Yeah.
And my seminars are more educational than marketing. And people appreciate that and trust that. So I think people remember me. They keep my materials. They show up with the folder in hand. And a lot of times, even if those people didn't hire me, they took a second folder and gave it to someone else. And so estate planning, nobody's in a hurry to do it. So that's why it takes a longer time to build. A lot of people who come to me, it's either after they saw somebody go through something terrible when someone died, or now they've gotten a diagnosis and they're sick, or it's an emergency, or they've been meaning to do it. And so that has definitely worked as far as um building brand awareness, people knowing who I am. When I give out a business card, I give out 2, one for you and one for a friend. And so I was like, I gotta eat. I have a mortgage. I have and that kind of thing. A lot of my friends who have businesses or building practices have spouses with jobs. That is not my situation. I definitely have family support. I've had mom serving as a witness in many will signings. And so yeah, and she helped me financially too. But but yeah, so what works for me, that has definitely worked for building the community knowledge of who I am. And I showed up at everything. And when COVID happened, things went backwards for me for a minute. And then it came back. Now this year I've started doing seminars, but with more targeted. I'm doing the ones with the mailings. Okay, those are very expensive because I send out 5,000. You probably have done things. I don't do steak dinners like you financial advisors do. And so, but I send out mailings to 5,000 people. I purchased a mailing list, people who are homeowners, um, live in a certain mile radius. The companies help you figure out the demographics. And so, stamps are expensive. You send out 5,000 mailings. They say 0.5% to 1% registration is good. And so I've done that for about 3 months this year. And when you do the targeted mailings like that, I think you get people who are already qualified, We call them qualified leads who can afford what I do, and then also want what I do because my mailing list is 50 and older, so people are thinking about it. And then the other piece of it is during my presentation, I educate, but they always want to know price. There was a time I didn't tell price until they came to the consultation. So now they get a free consultation, but I tell them in my seminar, there's a price list and I explain my pricing. And so then the people who show up for the consultations already know the price, already and already have had the education. And so if they take the time to come and see me, they're more likely to hire me versus the tire kickers or the do-it-yourselfers who are coming thinking that they're going to be able to find out how to create a will or a trust for themselves or just price shopping. So, because people who are price shopping, there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to also understand what you're getting, and it can waste a lot of time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you do have to go with a fish or body. And like you said, you can spin your tires a lot talking to people who were never going to sign up for whatever reason. It could be a valid reason.
Right,
That's just not how you build a business. Um,
right.
think about building your business. As a financial planner, income is important for my clients. How do you think about paying yourself? A lot of people either pay themselves a fixed rate every month. Some people do a percentage of their revenue. Like when you think about, well, how am I going to fund my lifestyle from your business? How does that work?
So for me, it comes down to what my expenses are right now. All right, I have a mortgage, don't have a car note anymore, but those types of things. So I want to be able to do certain things. So I figured out my budget and make sure that I can at least cover that. All right, and I'm not at the point yet because I'm still growing. I started later in life with this practice, and so I do more reinvesting in the firm. All right. And so one of the things that I have, so I make sure that I can cover my minimum expenses with some play money. All right. And so that's how I've had to do it. And like I said, in the first year I had a full-time job. And the money, all of the extra money that I took from that went to the firm. And for me, in order to scale up, I have to have other people. I can't do everything. I can't wear all the hats. Um, so one of the things that I have started now, which I think is great, and one of my mentors told me about, is profit first. All right, because we do look at covering all the expenses. We have our income, revenue, um, and then we pay the expenses, and what's left is the profit. And Profit First, it's a great book. And have you heard of it?
Yes, I have.
Okay, yeah, and it talks about treating profit as an expense, and it takes it off the top. And it's a way of building your reserves and building your income without really feeling it. And so I have started doing that this year. So it's starting to build my reserves and that type of thing. But for right now, um, I have a team of 6 right now. I have 3 virtuals and 2, including myself, and 2 people in house. And so I need at least one more person in house. So right now I'm still reinvesting in the business, but I've also started using the profit first model so that I can build that reserve, and have money for, business goes up and down. You always have to make payroll. So,
Yeah, so I've started reading the Profit First book actually last week, and one of the things that it harps on is that Profit First forces your business to operate leaner than what
mhm.
you would normally operate if you just think about the revenue minus expenses as your profit. Um, and I'm always wondering, because of course I'm gonna try to implement some of the principles. How have you operated leaner? Because now it's coming off the top. Like you do have a payroll to cover every month. Like like how do you balance the leanness versus what you want to do, the level that you want to operate at? Because historically you may have not been using a profit first model.
So, and the book is really good about that. This is a good plug for Profit First. But
Mhm.
you don't, it gives you recommended percentages, but you don't just jump into that. It'll say start at 1%. Um, and 1%, if you take it off the revenue, you take 1% or however much off, you don't necessarily feel that. I'm in a position where my business is growing. All right. And so I have not had to really work leaner because of the Profit First so much. Now, because my business, I'm 10 years, so my business is growing. I'm getting referrals, that type of thing. I have a bookkeeper, which, and that's one thing that I would recommend, from the outset. I didn't get my bookkeeper until probably 2 years ago. I do have a degree in accounting. I and so and I have an extensive business and operations and administrative background. And so where a lot of professionals, lawyers, doctors, or whatever don't have the business knowledge, I do. I had more of that, but one person can't do everything. And so my bookkeeper and we meet every 2 weeks on Fridays, and we go through the books. We go through, and she makes recommendations. She makes recommendations of where I may be spending too much, or I have duplicate things. I've got box.com and dropbox.com. And so we can get rid of one of things. And so that constant, you make a mistake and pay, because as an attorney, often we take retainers and things into the client trust fund, and we have our operating fund, and your things don't go from so when your money comes in, it goes into the client trust fund, and then when you earn it, you pay yourself to the operating fund. And so she helped me find where I hadn't paid. So it was like when you're trying to do it all and you're wearing all the hats, you can. And so because I never want to be in a position where it's the other way around, where I've taken too much out of the client trust fund, because that money belongs to the client. So I had too much in the client trust fund, but you're not supposed to have your own funds in there either. So working with the bookkeeper every 2 weeks, we're making sure, okay, this came in, now you can pay yourself. All right. And so and that's made a difference, because there were where I didn't realize I hadn't paid myself, because I'm constantly going, churning. So, and then where we look at the expenses, I think that just makes a huge difference, working with a good bookkeeper to go through all of your finances. I applied for a small business loan last year. She helped me get all of that stuff together, and we were successful.
So my background is in corporate finance, and part of my job back in the day was submit reports to product owners of different business lines. And it always fascinated me, different product owners focused on different elements of the financials as their key indicator of success. In our
Okay.
pre-call, you mentioned you regularly review your finances. What key metrics do you primarily focus on over others that really show you, well, my business is healthy, my business is doing well?
Okay. So for me, um, it's the percentage of conversions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. um that's one of the biggest things. So for instance, with the seminars, if I send out a mailing of 5,000 and I get 50 people at a seminar, how many people are raising their hand and coming for a consultation?
Yeah.
Okay. And then how many of those people actually hire me? And so I use flat fees. And so that is one of the key things. The conversions. We look at our monthly expenses. Um, um, I'm getting better, the KPIs, I'm getting better at that. And so, but I'm always aware of what I'm doing, because I've always got a spreadsheet even before the bookkeeper. But my biggest thing is the conversions, and we're looking at how fast we're being able to get the work done. Um, But that is still, for me, that's an area where I've got my dashboard, but do I use it? That type of thing. So what I'm looking at every year is my, because a lot of times it takes a few years before you break even. So am I breaking even? How far am I? And even when I reinvest, now I'm reinvesting, I'm hiring, but hiring, I'm getting more work done. And so my numbers are still going up. So I look at the revenue, I look at the expenses, and then the net profit. So, first few years there's no profit. We're net loss. And so those are the key things that I'm looking at. I don't know if that helped.
We talked about a lot of this in the pre-call. As a financial planner, as you can imagine, I'm not a big fan of debt, especially for service-based businesses. But I've been doing my job long enough to know that there's different ways to skin a cat. I'm wondering, as a business owner, how do you see debt? How are you leveraging debt? Like, where does debt fit in your business life?
Leveraging what?
Debt. So debt is a
Oh,
leverage.
okay. Hmm. Well, I think for me, coming in, I didn't take any loans. And I feel like I probably should have done that sooner, but it's not easy to get a small business loan. But I used credit cards, and in the beginning I did a lot of things for the business with the credit cards. And so, but what happens with that, those financing charges get up there. And so, because I had so that's what, when I got my small business loan last year, that's the first thing I did, was I paid off the credit cards, because those finances, you're paying a house note on the finance charges. But absolutely, depending on whatever your business is, for me, I had to hire people. You have office expenses, you have office rent, and so you've got to spend money to make money. And I initially worked out of my house. Then my insurance company decided I couldn't work out of the house. They didn't want me to meet clients in the house. So I had to get an office space. And so I had to use those credit cards initially to build, but you have to keep at it. And lifestyle changes. I worked a lot. I still work a lot. And then you finally get to that point where you have more time for yourself, and you have more. I don't know if that helps. I don't know if that answers the question you were asking, because I've definitely used credit cards to finance my practice. I have used debt, and then I got the small business loan, what I'm looking at, and that helped a lot to take care of. That's why I was able to start the targeted marketing program. So with the small business loan, I paid off the credit card debt, and now at first I was like, you know, um, I didn't want to spend it all at once. But I didn't get a large loan. And so I was like, if I want this to work, you just got to jump in and do it. So I'm like, you got it for the marketing. And it takes some time to see it working, but I am seeing it working, because when I met with my bookkeeper on Friday, she said, because I've been doing a lot of marketing um, this first quarter, and she said, you haven't brought in as many clients. And my January and February, I think, were the lowest that I've had in the past few years. But I think it was because I spent a lot of time trying to get and then I've spent a lot of time marketing, and usually those are lower months. But she said to me, okay, you have fewer clients this first quarter, substantially fewer clients, but you are $1,000 ahead of where you were at this point in time last year. And so we have improved. We have added a program, our maintenance program, and we have also gotten more qualified clients in the door. So the marketing is working, and we raised our prices just a little bit. So
I think that's interesting. Like I said, I love the realness of it. This is why I have the debt. This is how I'm utilizing the debt. Right
yeah,
or wrong, this is how real business owners operate. And I
Yeah.
think that needs to be said. You mentioned employees, and a lot of people did not go into business to be a manager, managing people. And one of the biggest obstacles of managing business is churn, attrition, people leaving, people coming, onboarding, doing all those things. What are your thoughts around like rebuilding a staff, attrition? Like you've had experience with this. Like what can you share about that?
So, it's important to know how to manage people. It's important to know how to hire. Okay, because people hire the wrong people. That's one great thing for me is that I do have a business background and an administrative background. And I told you that I went backwards right during COVID. Part of that was because I was working by myself, total solo. And then the first person I hired was a young lady who had just finished college, 3.8 GPA. And I was like, I hesitate to hire you because you didn't go to college and get a I was hiring a part-time person for $12 an hour. And I was like, you didn't go get a 3.8 GPA so you could work for me part-time for $12 an hour. And she was like, I really want to be a lawyer and this. And so, we both took a risk on each other. She was the best. We grew together. And it was at a point where I couldn't afford to hire somebody, but I couldn't afford not to. When that year where I had spent $50,000 and brought in 14, I had 3 clients. I knew everything that was going on with. And so I hired her, then I hired a second person, and business starts to grow if you hire the right people. So I had, going into COVID, I had 3 people in place, great team. We worked well together. They knew what expectations were. You have to know how to manage the people and communicate what you need and train, because I hired inexperienced people. And then COVID happened, and being an educator and someone who loves education, she went to law school. Oh, I encouraged and I pushed. And the other young lady, she was first generation American. Her parents were from Mexico, and she wanted to go back and get her degree. And I, pushed. And I was like, yeah, go be all you can be. And I tried to hire at COVID. It was hard to find competent people who wanted to work. So I lost my core team. We had built up a nice size practice. Things were taking off, and now I'm by myself doing all the work. And that's why things went back. And it's COVID. And so that's why things went backwards, because I didn't have people to help me do the work. And we were in a pandemic. And so now things have picked back up. And so, but hiring, and I started using, I have some virtual, you know, and that is, even then with those people, you have to hire right, make sure they have the right skill set. um and that takes interviewing, knowing what you need, that type of thing. And there's a book that's called Hire Slow, Fire Fast. And so, and that's very true. Someone who can't do the work and won't do the work, you don't need in your office. And so I had one person who I hired before the young lady who was going to law school left, because I wanted to have that cross training and all of that. I hired her on Monday and I fired her the next Monday. She wanted a typing accommodation. I said, "What is a typing accommodation?" She couldn't type. She couldn't 2 finger. And so it's like, that's all we do here. And then she had her cell phone on the desk, on a stand. She didn't get off the phone when I walked in the room. The others complained about, how it's distractive. And so yeah, I don't know if that addresses your question, because you talk about attrition. You have to have, so the thing that we're working on now is our operating manual, because we want all of the procedures documented, so when a new person comes, there's a smaller learning curve. Because a lot of times for me, when a new person comes, and especially in the beginning, the first couple of weeks, they didn't have anything to do because I'm so busy doing all of the work. I've got to step off and take time to show them how to do the work, but eventually they get real busy. So I don't know. Did that answer your question?
I think what is it called? Hire slow, fire fast. I think that's a
Yeah.
pretty valuable operating agreement. I mean, that's probably worth its way to go. That probably
Yes.
helps you more than it helps them sometimes.
Yes.
So
And
I
we're
think
working on automating things with technology.
so. Last question I ask everybody is: this is a show called Practice Prosperity. What does a prosperous business mean to you?
So what I would like my practice to be is one where I'm continuing to meet my goals of helping and educating, in particular, my community about estate planning. But I want it to be a business where my needs are met financially. I'm not working constantly all the time.
Yeah, no,
And same thing for my team. I don't want it to be a place where people dread going to work. So the team has to fit, has to be committed to the cause. And so so prosperity, there has to be enough money for everyone for no one to be overworked.
yeah.
No one to be underworked. And and to afford for everyone to have appropriate work-life balance. Now that does not mean that the support team, if your job is the administrative assistant, you're not going to get paid at the same level as the attorney partner, but everybody for what they do is making a reasonable or a good salary, have good benefits, and enjoy work, because attrition is very costly and it'll take you backwards, as I said. And I was pushing them out the door. Yeah, go be you, be all you can be. And then I was like, oh, where are they?
This work needs to be done. So if somebody's listening to this and they say, I need a estate planner, I love that you work with individuals with special needs. You work with the elder care, preparing for Medicaid. Like, what is the best way for them to reach out and contact you?
Well, the telephone, of course, 404-349-2220. And our website, www.ducketlawllc.com. ducketlawllc.com. Those are the best ways. Yep. And we have YouTube channels and Facebook and all of that too. So.
And all of her links will be in the description below. So if you want to check her out, please look at that. First of all, thank you for this conversation. I love the fact that you went in depth. I think you showed the necessity of planning for special needs, planning for Medicare, planning for succession, planning for businesses. I think we forget about that in the grind of our day-to-day active business. So thank you very much, Dione Traci Duckett, founder of Duckett Law, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Randall.
Take care.
You built a successful practice, but behind the scenes, it still feels messy. Cash flow surprises, unclear projections, and no real system separating your business and your personal wealth. That's the problem. Most advisors just focus on investments, but what you actually need is clarity. That's where I come in. With Diesel Practice Clarity, we organize your numbers, build forward-looking projections, and create a system that turns income into predictable wealth. Not just more revenue, but a plan that actually shows you how to keep what you have earned. If you're ready to stop guessing and start building wealth, let's talk.